Okay, this is section 3.11 from Math 980, and in this section we are talking about the greatest common factor. So what this means is, first of all, a factor is a piece of multiplication. In other words, if I had 2 times 3 equals 6, the 2 is considered a factor, and the 3 is considered a factor, and they're both factors of 6 because if you multiply them together, you will get the 6, okay? So if I'm looking for the greatest common factor, they might give me a list of numbers. Let's say I have the numbers 4 and 6, and they want me to give them the greatest common factor. So what they're asking for is, what is the biggest factor of 4 that is also a factor of 6? So one thing you can do is you can list the factors of 4. So what make up 4 using multiplication? 1 times 4, 2 times 2. So the factors of 4 would be a 1, a 2, or a 4, okay? Each of these is a factor of 4. They divide evenly into 4, and that's another way of thinking about it. All right, so what about for 6? Well, I have 1 times 6, 2 times 3. So the factors of 6 would be 1, 2, 3, and 6. So these are the factors of 4. These are the factors of 6. So what factors do they have in common? Well, they have the 1, but everything has a 1 in common, so we tend to not really concern ourselves with that. But they also have a 2 in common, and that's it, right? So in this case, they only have 1 factor in common, so it happens to be the greatest. It's the biggest factor that they have in common. So the GCF of 4 and 6 would be 2, and that's how we would figure that out. Okay. That being said, there are some shorter ways of trying to figure it out. So let's say I was looking for the greatest common factor of 6 and 10, okay? Well, let me try something a little bit different. Let me try 10 and 25, let's say, okay? So what we can do as a rule of thumb, if you want a nice little algorithm for this, is pick the smaller of the numbers and start with its factors. So in this case, the factors of 10 would be, 1, which I'm not going to worry about for 1. So what else? 2 goes into 10, 5 goes into 10, and of course 10 goes into 10. So those are the factors I'm concerned with. You start with the bigger one and ask yourself, does 10 go into 25 evenly? And the answer is no. If you weren't sure, you could take your calculator and do 25 divided by 10 and see if you get a nice whole number or an integer. In this case, you don't. You'll get a fraction or a decimal. So therefore, 10 is not a factor of 25. So it doesn't qualify. How about 5? Does 5 go into 25 evenly? Yes, it does. 5 goes into 25 5 times. So even if 2 went into 25, which it doesn't, we're looking for the greatest common factor. So the answer would have to be 5. So here the GCF is 5. It's the biggest number that fits evenly into both individual numbers that you started with. So in the first question on 311, they give you 3 numbers, which makes it a little more difficult. So I've got 30x squared, and then I've got 110x to the 4th. Now yours may be a little bit different, but that's fine. And then I have 60x to the 9th. So this is a little more complicated because first of all, you have 3 numbers instead of 4. And second of all, you've got variables, the x's, as well as the number coefficients there, right? So my recommendation would be start with the numbers. So I'm looking at the number 30, 110, and 60. And you remember the rule of thumb that I said, start with the smallest, okay? Start with the smallest number. Well, here, I'll put it right here. So the smallest is 30, okay? And ask yourself this question. Does 30 fit evenly into 110? And the answer is no. So even though it fits into 60, it doesn't matter because it doesn't fit into 110, so therefore it's not common to all of them. So now I would go down to the next smallest factor of 30. Now that's a little bit trickier for some people. What are the factors of 30? Well, you can list them out if you don't just know them off the top of your head. 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 4 does not go in, 5 times 6, and then my next number would be 6, which I already have there, so I know I've exhausted the total factors there. So it seems like there's a little glare, so I'm going to try to adjust my camera slightly. I don't know if it'll help or not. Ah, there you go. Okay, I'm going to try not to write down in that lower part. So my next smallest factor of 30, which is right in the glare, is 15. So I would try 15. 15 definitely goes into 30. Does it go into 110? No. And how do I know? I could put it on my calculator. 110 divided by 15 is not a nice round number. And how about 60? Yes, but doesn't matter because it didn't go into 110. Next biggest factor of 30 would be 10. Does 10 go into 30? Yes. 110? Yes. 60? Yes. So therefore 10 is going to be the greatest common factor of these three original numbers. Now, when it comes to the variables, that's actually the easy part, because x squared goes into x to the fourth because x squared times x squared equals x to the fourth. And x squared goes into x to the ninth because x squared times x to the seventh equals x to the ninth. So no matter what these other exponents were, the x squared would fit into them. What's the biggest that's common to all of them? It would have to be the x squared, because anything bigger will not fit into the smaller, which is the x squared. So all you have to do for the variables is just choose the smallest. So this would be the GCF for this question. Okay, so question number 2 is only variables, and that's much easier because I have a to the third b and negative a b squared. And they asked for the greatest common factor. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to consider the a's first. I don't worry about the negative. This is a to the 1 if I really wanted to write the exponent. So the smaller of the a's would be the a to the 1. That's smaller than a to the 3. So my GCF, my greatest common factor, would have to have an a to the 1. For the b's, my smallest of the b's, this is b to the 1, that's b to the 2. So b to the 1 is smallest. So that's my GCF for the entire, well, the two terms, okay? So AB is my answer for that one. So that's not as bad, I don't think. All right, where are we going with this? Well, if in the past we had something like 2b, let's say, times 4b plus 1. Okay, we did this in a previous section. And they asked us to distribute. So that means we're going to multiply this and we're going to multiply this. Well, 2b times 4b is 8b squared. And 2b times 1 is a positive 2b. Okay? So this is not that big of a deal. Most people do pretty well with the distributive property. Well, what we're doing in this section, 3.11, is we are reversing this. So instead of multiplying, we're going to factor out the GCF. So essentially we're going to get from this line back to this one. So the first question would be, what is the GCF between 8b squared and 2b? Well, first consider the coefficients, 8 and 2. I'm going to start with the smallest, which is 2. the only factor of 2 other than 1, if 1's a factor of everything, is 2. So that's got to be the greatest factor of 2, and in fact, it is a factor of 8 as well. So the greatest common factor would be 2. 2 fits into 2, 2 fits into 8. Now, going to the variables, you're just going to choose the smaller one. So b to the 1 is the smaller of the two variables. So this is my GCF. Notice that's what I had there. If I factor that GCF out, I'm left with an empty set of parentheses, and I need to put in here what's remaining after I factored out the 2b. If I started with 2 terms, I must have 2 terms remaining in the parentheses. So one way you can do this is you can say to yourself, 2 times what is 8? Well, the answer is 4. B times what is b squared? The answer is b. So 2b times 4b equals 8b squared. Yes, that's true. 2b, or you could break it down. 2 times what is 2? Well, 2 times 1 is 2. B times 1 is also b. So 2b times 1 is 2b. And this is the piece that a lot of people forget. And that's why I emphasize the fact that if we started with 2 terms, we must have 2 terms left in our parentheses. So this is the answer that they're looking for in problem number 3, where we used our ability to find the GCF, and then we factored it out and showed what's remaining. So question 4 is pretty much the same, and so is 5. Then we get to question 6, and for mine, now yours may be a little bit different, but for mine I get 13w to the 3rd power minus 25, and they want me to factor it. Well, so I begin. My smallest coefficient is 13. The factors of 13 are just 1 times 13, that's it. So I have to ask if 13 fits evenly into 25, which it does not. So therefore, the greatest common factor between 13 and 25 is just 1. 1 is the only number that fits into both 13 and 25. And if that's the case, then there is no other GCF other than 1. You're going to check B, there is no common factor except 1. Okay, number 7 is similar to what we were doing. Let's quickly look at number 8, because it just has 3 terms instead of 2. So I have 18x to the 3rd minus 12x squared plus 6x, and they want me to factor the GCF. Okay, so I have an 18, a 12, and a 6. I'm going to start with the smaller number 6. Does 6 go into 6? Yes. Does 6 go into 12? Yes. Does 6 go evenly into 18? Yes. So 6 is the largest, or the greatest common factor to those 3 coefficients. So I'm going to have a 6 there. For my variables, I have x to the 1, x to the 2, x to the 3. I'm going to choose the smallest, x to the 1. So that's my greatest common factor. I open my parentheses, and remember, there should be 3 terms in here. Sorry. There should be 3 terms left in here because we started with 3 terms. So 6 times what is 18? 6 times 3 is 18. X times what is x to the 3rd? X squared. X times x squared is x to the 3rd. 6 times what is minus 12? Negative 2. X times what is x? 6x times what is 6x? Then this would be a plus 1, and that would be the answer. Okay, good luck with that. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next section.